to understand something, really understand it, before it's too late, before you make the same mistake. Because I'm trapped here, locked in this frozen, desolate space, and it's all my fault. Every shivering breath, every twitch of fear, every desperate, silent prayer, it's a consequence of one stupid, desperate decision. They told me there were rules, 7 of them. Simple, clear, easy to follow. I thought they were just quirks, eccentricities of a remote Alaskan operation. But they weren't. They were warnings. And I broke the most important one. I took the money. This isn't some campfire story. This is my life, or what's left of it. I'm broadcasting this, screaming it into the void, hoping someone hears before the sun finally sets for good, and whatever's out there decides it's had enough fun with me. My name is Alex, and I work the night shift at the Creepypasta toll booth. Or I did. Look at this place. Can you even imagine? It's not just remote, it's forgotten. A single decrepit wooden booth nestled like a rotten tooth in the jaw of the Chugach Mountains, miles from the nearest anything. Not even a gas station, just a ribbon of cracked asphalt, a crumbling barrier, and an endless, crushing silence that the snow absorbs like a sponge. The air here doesn't just feel cold, it feels ancient, heavy with the weight of unseen things, unsaid words. It smells of pine, of damp earth, and something else. Something metallic and old, like frozen blood or rust. Every groan of the old timber, every shriek of wind through the gaps in the wall feels like a living thing, breathing, watching. I can feel the eyes on me, even when there's nothing there. That's what it does to you, this place. It strips away your certainties, one nerve-fraying whisper at a time. I remember seeing the ad flickering on a dusty monitor in a dingy internet cafe in Anchorage. Remote toll booth attendant, excellent pay, isolated location. Isolated was an understatement. Desolate was closer. Death sentence would have been spot on. But I was running from debt, running from bad choices, running from a life that felt like it was suffocating me under the gray skies of a city I hated. I'd lost everything, the apartment, the decent job, even the dog. All because of a string of terrible, impulsive decisions that always started with just one more. The thought of all that solitude, all that empty space, it felt like freedom, a chance to disappear, to breathe. God, I was so desperate, so naive. The sheer desperation made me blind, deaf, and dumb to the glaring red flags waving in front of my face. The journey up here was a blur of gray roads, endless forests, and increasingly oppressive silence. My old beat-up sedan rattled and groaned, mirroring my own internal protests. I passed ghost towns, hollowed-out remnants of forgotten dreams, their windows like vacant eyes staring into the void. Each mile deepened the feeling of being swallowed by the wilderness, by something vast and indifferent. By the time I reached the turnoff for Creepypasta, the sun was a thin, sickly yellow smear on the horizon, already dipping below the jagged peaks. The last miles were on an unpaved road, barely more than a muddy track, hemmed in by towering, snow-laden spruce trees that seemed to lean in, whispering secrets. The air grew colder, biting, tasting of frost and something else. Something mineral. The toll booth itself was worse than I could have imagined. Not a modern structure, but something cobbled together from rough-hewn timber and corrugated metal, leaning precariously, as if the earth itself was trying to shrug it off. Its windows were grimy, coated with a film of ice and dirt, reflecting the bleak, fading light like blind eyes. Inside, It was cramped, claustrophobic, reeking of mildew, damp earth, and old cigarettes. A single flickering fluorescent light hummed overhead, casting sickly shadows that danced with every gust of wind. The heater was a wheezing, asthmatic thing, barely taking the edge off the Arctic chill. The onboarding was brief, almost non-existent. A grizzled old-timer, smelled like stale cigarettes and fish, was waiting for me. He had a face like craggy granite, etched with lines that spoke of too many harsh winters and too many things seen in the dark. His eyes were the color of glacial ice, flat and emotionless, yet somehow carrying a vast, ancient weariness. He didn't offer a name, just grunted, "You Alex?" I nodded, my breath pluming out in the frigid air. He handed me a heavy, clunky old radio, a set of keys, and a laminated sheet of paper. 7 rules. He didn't explain them, just gestured vaguely towards the sheet. Follow 'em, or don't. Your funeral. He had a strange, knowing look in his eyes, like he'd seen things that didn't fit in the world. He spoke with a gravelly voice, raspy from years of shouting over gales and who knows what else. This ain't like city work. Things are different out here. Old ways, old agreements. He paused, his gaze drifting past me towards the darkening mountains, as if something was watching from the peaks. The rules ain't suggestions, boy. They're protections. You break 'em, you're on your own. Ain't no help gonna come. Not out here. I just figured he was crazy, or maybe just tired of this frozen hellhole. A lonely old man, driven half mad by the solitude. I wish I'd listened. I wish I'd paid attention to the way the shadows clung to the corners of the small office, even in the brief twilight, as if something was constantly lurking just out of sight, barely contained. The first few nights were peaceful in a terrifying way. The only sounds were the wind, a mournful whisper through the pines, and the occasional creak of the booth settling deeper into the permafrost. And the snow. Always the snow, falling in fat, lazy flakes that muffled everything, turning the world into a vast, white canvas of nothingness. My breath plumed out in ragged clouds, my fingers numb even inside thick gloves. The air was so dry it cracked my skin, and the silence was so profound it buzzed in my ears, making me jump at phantom noises. That's when I started to feel it, that creeping dread, the kind that sinks into your bones, telling you something is fundamentally wrong. Not just with the job or the location, but with the very fabric of reality out here. The wilderness wasn't just vast, it was aware. It was listening. I'd read the rules, of course, skimmed them really. They seemed absurd. 1. Always keep the light on. 2. Never open the barrier for an empty vehicle. 3. Do not engage with the driver if their face is obscured. 4. Do not accept payment in anything other than U.S. currency. 5. Never, under any circumstances, take payment directly from their hand. 6. If a vehicle asks for directions, always tell them to turn back. 7. Do not look at the sky after midnight. Crazy, right? Especially rule number 5. Never take payment directly from their hand. Why? Some weird hygiene thing? Or a superstition? I laughed it off. I was desperate for money, and frankly, a little arrogant. I thought I knew better. I thought these were just old tales designed to freak out new hires in a place where people tended to crack. And then the first car came. It was late, well past midnight. The snow had started falling again, thick and heavy, obscuring the road. 2 pinpricks of light slowly materialized through the blizzard, growing into the hazy glow of headlights. A beat-up, rusty pickup truck, its engine rumbling like a distant growl, pulled up to the barrier. It looked ancient, covered in so much mud and road salt you couldn't tell its original color. The driver's side window, coated in ice, slowly whined down, revealing nothing, just a dark void where a face should be. My stomach clenched. Rule number 3. Do not engage with the driver if their face is obscured. But my curiosity, my fear, was warring with my desperation. This was my first customer, my first interaction. I couldn't just ignore them. I cleared my throat, trying to sound professional. Toll's $20. A hand emerged from the darkness. Not a normal hand. It was too long, too pale, with fingers that seemed to have too many joints, or bent at unnatural angles. It held out a crumpled $20 bill. My heart hammered against my ribs. Rule number 5. Never, under any circumstances, take payment directly from their hand. My mind screamed at me, don't do it, but the money. The very real, crisp-looking $20. It represented a meal, a bill paid, a small step away from the abyss I was teetering on. My entire purpose for being here was money. It was the solution to all my problems. And I hesitated, just for a second. That was my mistake. I reached out. My fingers brushed against those fingers. They felt like cold, dry twigs, brittle yet impossibly strong. A shiver, colder than the Alaskan night, went straight through me, rattling my teeth. I snatched the bill. The hand retracted into the darkness, and I heard a faint, rasping sound from inside the truck. Was it a laugh, a sigh, or something else entirely? The truck rumbled once more, and then, slowly, silently, the barrier lifted on its own. It hadn't done that before. I hadn't pressed the button. The truck drove off into the blizzard, its taillights swallowed by the snow within seconds. I stood there, the $20 bill clutched in my trembling hand. It felt warm now, unnaturally warm. I looked down at it, and that's when everything changed. That's when I realized what was really paying my salary. And it wasn't the company. It was something far, far worse. And it had just claimed me. The $20 bill. It felt like a sick joke in my hand. The warmth intensified, growing from a faint heat to a searing ember, as if I'd plucked it from a dying campfire. I yelped, dropping it onto the grimy countertop of the booth. It didn't smoke, didn't char, but the warmth remained, radiating from the crumpled paper as if it possessed its own terrible pulse. I stared at it, my eyes wide, heart hammering against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence of the night. Then the ink began to bleed, not smear, but actively bleed. The green of Washington's portrait dissolved into murky, swirling patterns, deepening into a sickening reddish brown like old, dried blood. The crisp edges softened, curling inwards, the paper itself thickening, becoming coarse and fibrous like human skin, or something that used to be skin. A faint, cloying odor rose from it, something metallic and sweet, like iron mixed with decay. It was the smell of the booth, intensified, focused on this single, cursed object. This wasn't money. This was payment from something that shouldn't exist, for a transaction I should have refused. A wave of nausea washed over me, cold and clammy. My hands started to tremble uncontrollably, a fine tremor that soon became a violent shaking. My teeth chattered, not from the cold, but from a profound internal chill that had nothing to do with the Alaskan air. I felt it crawling under my skin, this thing I'd touched, contaminating me. My throat was suddenly dry, constricted. I tried to swallow but couldn't. My eyes darted around the booth, seeing shadows that weren't there, hearing whispers in the whine of the old heater. The silence outside was no longer peaceful. It was a gaping maw, waiting. I picked up the laminated sheet of rules, my fingers fumbling, still trembling violently. Never, under any circumstances, take payment directly from their hand. The words seemed to swell, to burn into my retina. I hadn't just broken a rule. I'd invited something in. I'd offered a handshake to the unknown, and it had taken my whole arm. The $20 bill lay on the counter, now a grotesque, leathery swatch, the pattern of blood-red ink forming an unsettling, abstract design. It wasn't usable. It was just a memento, a token of my folly. And in that moment, I knew. My salary wasn't coming from some faceless corporation. It was coming from them, and the price was going to be far higher than I could ever afford. The sun didn't rise properly for days after that. Not a real sun, just a weak, anemic glow that barely chased the shadows from the peaks, leaving the valley in a perpetual, freezing twilight. The booth felt smaller, colder, the walls pressing in on me. Every creak of the timber was a groan, every gust of wind a whisper. I kept the fluorescent light on. Always. Rule number 1. Always keep the light on. It seemed simple enough, right? A basic safety precaution in a remote area. But after that first night, the light became a fortress, a flimsy, humming shield against the encroaching darkness. I found myself obsessively checking the bulb, tapping the casing. The light flickered sometimes, a brief, heart-stopping stutter that plunged the booth into an even deeper, more absolute blackness for a split second. And in those micro-instants, I saw things, or thought I did, shapes, not defined, solid shapes, but fleeting, liquid distortions in the air, just beyond the glass, on the very edge of the light's reach. They moved with a disturbing fluidity, like smoke given malicious intent, or shadows detaching from their sources. One night, the light sputtered, winked out, and for a terrifying second, the booth was plunged into absolute black. I gasped, a strangled sound, my hands flying up to cover my face. When the light flickered back on, my heart hammered, my breath ragged. There, plastered against the icy pane of glass, was a handprint. Not a human handprint. It was too large, the fingers too long, too thin, ending in sharp, claw-like tips. It was etched into the frost, a perfect, terrifying negative. It hadn't been there a moment before. I stared at it, frozen, my breath fogging the glass further, distorting the horrific image. Then, as I watched, it slowly, deliberately, began to melt from the inside, leaving only a dark, greasy smudge before vanishing entirely. That's when I understood. The light didn't just illuminate, it repelled. And if it went out, even for a moment, whatever was out there could get in, or worse, leave its mark. I didn't sleep much, maybe an hour or two at a time, slumped in the rickety chair, jolting awake at every phantom noise. My dreams were a jumbled nightmare of distorted faces, long, pale hands reaching, and the terrifying scent of decay. My skin felt clammy, my hair felt like it was standing on end, permanently wired for terror. My radio, my lifeline, was useless, just static, sometimes punctuated by strange, garbled sounds that weren't voices, weren't music. They sounded like a wet, guttural humming, or something scraping against a vast, hollow surface. I tried my cell phone. No signal, of course. I was truly, utterly alone. Then came the next rule. Rule number 2. Never open the barrier for an empty vehicle. I'd scoffed at this one initially. An empty car? What? Was it a ghost? I quickly learned it was far worse than a ghost. It was the absence of one. It was the third night after my transaction. The snow was falling, soft and silent, muffling the world. Two distant headlights emerged from the swirling white. It was a sleek, black sedan, the kind you'd see in a funeral procession. It glided towards the barrier, silent as a whisper, the only sound the soft crunch of its tires on the packed snow. My hand hovered over the barrier button, my heart thumping. This was a normal car, or so I told myself. As it drew closer, under the harsh glare of the booth's light, I saw it. The windows were opaque, not tinted, but utterly black, reflecting no light, showing no interior, and the driver's seat was empty. No silhouette, no hint of a form, nothing. Just an immaculate, vacant cabin. My blood ran cold. The car stopped precisely at the barrier, its engine a low, resonant thrum, too low, too resonant. It vibrated through the ground, through the booth floor, up into my bones. It felt like a heartbeat, a monstrous, unseen heart. I stared at the empty driver's seat, then at the barrier. My fingers twitched, desperate to press the button to make it go away. But the rule echoed in my mind. Never open the barrier for an empty vehicle. The seconds stretched into an eternity. The car just sat there, humming, waiting. I could feel its gaze, even though there were no eyes. A profound sense of wrongness emanated from it, a cold, patient malice. The air in the booth grew even colder, a freezing tendril creeping up my spine. My breath hitched. This wasn't a car, it was a shell, a vessel. For what? Suddenly, a faint tapping sound came from the driver's side window. Tap, tap, tap. It was soft, almost imperceptible over the hum of the engine, but it was there, rhythmic, insistent. My eyes were fixed on the window, willing something to appear, terrified of what would. But nothing did. Just the tapping. From inside, the empty vehicle. I pulled my hand away from the button, as if burned. Number I wouldn't. I couldn't. I pressed myself back into the corner of the booth, my eyes wide, fixed on the black windows. The tapping continued. Then, a new sound, faint and chilling, like something scuttling on glass. A scratching. A slow, deliberate, etching sound. I realized it wasn't a hand tapping. It was something with sharp points, like claws, or fingernails, drawn slowly down the window pane. The hum of the engine deepened, a resonant growl that vibrated through my chest. The car shifted just an inch, then settled back. It was trying to intimidate me, to make me break. My breath hitched. I squeezed my eyes shut, then forced them open. I would not open the barrier. I would not. Minutes bled into hours. Or maybe it was only 20 minutes. Time was warped out here. The car remained, a black, silent sentinel, its engine thrumming, the faint scratching continuing from within. I thought I heard a faint, wet, sniffing sound too, like an animal, a very large animal. My bladder ached, my teeth chattered, but I couldn't move. I was paralyzed by terror. And then, as abruptly as it had appeared, the hum of the engine faded. The car, without a visible driver, without any movement, simply began to back away, slowly, silently. Its taillights, two malevolent red eyes, receded into the blizzard, eventually vanishing. I collapsed against the wall, gasping for air, tears streaming down my face. I hadn't opened the barrier. I had survived rule number 2, but the terror of that silent, empty presence would haunt me. What was inside that car? What would have happened if I'd let it pass? My sanity, already fraying, was now unraveling at an alarming rate. The cold, the isolation, the constant gnawing fear. It was like living inside a freezer, the air thick with the scent of fear and the promise of something terrible. Rule number 3, do not engage with the driver if their face is obscured. I had already broken this one, hadn't I, with the first truck. But then it was just darkness obscuring the face. I thought it was just the poor lighting, or maybe a very deeply recessed seat. I had no idea. The next time it happened, it was different. Another night, another vehicle. This time, an old, rusty sedan, its paint peeling like diseased skin. It pulled up to the barrier. The window rolled down with a slow, grinding rasp, and the driver was there. But their face, it wasn't obscured by darkness. It was obscured by itself. It was shifting, distorting, like watching a reflection in rippling water, but it was permanent. The skin was too pale, translucent, showing a lattice of blue veins beneath. The eyes were too large, too black, lacking any whites, like two abyssal pools that swallowed the light. The mouth stretched too wide, a thin, unnaturally perfect line, and then it would contract, the lips seeming to fuse and then pull apart again. The nose would flatten, then elongate, then vanish entirely, leaving a smooth, featureless plane. It was like watching a face constantly melt and reform, but not in a fluid way. More like clay being kneaded and then re-sculpted by an invisible, impatient hand. I swallowed a scream. This wasn't a person. This was a mockery. A thing wearing the idea of a face. I remembered the rule, a chilling whisper in my mind. Do not engage. Don't acknowledge it. Don't let it know you see it. The thing raised a hand. Too long, too thin. It didn't hold money. It just slowly, deliberately, reached towards the glass of the booth. Its fingers, skeletal and unnervingly flexible, splayed out, pressing flat against the glass, just inches from my own face. I could see the faint, almost transparent nails like shards of ice. I stared at it, frozen with terror, my gaze fixed on the hand, refusing to look directly at the horror beyond. I could feel its gaze, though, a heavy, burning weight on my face, despite the shifting features. It was trying to make me look, to engage. Then, a voice. It wasn't human. It was a dry, rasping whisper, like dead leaves skittering across frozen ground. But it wasn't coming from the mouth. It seemed to emanate from the very air around the face, vibrating directly into my skull. P-I, the T-O-L-L. Each syllable was drawn out, stretched, punctuated by faint clicking sounds like bones grinding together. It was a sound that scraped against my eardrums, echoing in the hollow cavern of my skull. It wasn't a question. It was a command, and it was waiting for me to respond. I felt a primal urge to scream, to bolt, to smash the window, anything to get away from that thing. But the rule, do not engage. If I spoke, if I acknowledged it, what would happen? Would it reach through the glass? Would its face finally solidify into something truly monstrous? Or would it simply take me? I held my breath, my entire being screaming silently. My eyes remained fixed on the skeletal hand, unwilling to meet the shifting void of its face. And I waited. And the thing waited too. I waited. The eternity stretched, measured by the frantic thudding of my heart and the rasping whisper that still echoed in the booth. P-I-E. The T-O-L-L. It was testing me. It was feeding on my fear, on my struggle to remain silent. My lungs ached, desperate for air, but I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't speak. I clenched my jaw, my knuckles white, digging into the counter. My eyes remained fixed on the skeletal hand, refusing to meet the shifting void of its face. The silence between its horrific syllables became a living thing, buzzing with an unseen energy. The air grew heavy, thick with the smell of wet earth and something else. Something that prickled the inside of my nose, like static electricity before a lightning strike. The hand on the glass began to press harder, the translucent fingers seeming to flatten, to distort. It was as if the glass itself was a membrane, and the thing was trying to push through. And then, just as I thought my sanity would snap, just as I felt a hot, dizzying wave of blackness threaten to engulf me, the hand slowly, agonizingly retracted. The face, still morphing, seemed to smile. Not a human smile, but a stretching, sickening elongation of its features, revealing something sharp and glinting deep within the shifting maw. It was a silent, predatory acknowledgement. It knew I had seen it. It knew I was afraid. And it knew I was trying to play by its rules, even as it tested me. The car, without a word, without a sound, glided forward. The barrier again lifted on its own, a silent testament to whatever power this thing commanded. It vanished into the swirling snow. I sank to the floor, gasping, my body trembling, tears blurring my vision. I hadn't engaged. I had passed that test, but the image of that melting face, the sound of that voice, burned themselves into my mind, a fresh brand of terror. I was no longer just afraid. I was hunted. My nights became a blur of shivering terror and desperate adherence to the rules. The toll booth, once a sanctuary from debt, was now a cage. I rationed my food, too afraid to venture out, even for supplies. The world outside the booth was no longer just cold. It was hostile. Then came rule number 4. I hadn't truly grasped its implications until then. Rule number 4. Do not accept payment in anything other than U.S. currency. I remember the car, a beaten-up, rust-pocked minivan, its windows grimy, its tires bald. It pulled up to the barrier, its engine sputtering like a dying cough. This time, the driver was a woman, or what looked like a woman. Her face was gaunt, sickly pale, her hair a greasy, matted mess. Her eyes, sunken deep in shadowed sockets, seemed to hold an ancient, desperate weariness. She looked lost. She held out her hand. My heart leapt into my throat, already anticipating the horror of rule number 5. But this time, it wasn't a $20 bill. In her palm, cupped as if it were precious, was a small, crudely carved wooden bird. It was dark, almost black, and felt impossibly cold even through the glass. It had 2 tiny, unsettlingly bright red beads for eyes. It wasn't money. Please. Her voice was a dry, cracking whisper, like parchment being torn. This is all I have. He said, this would be enough. My mind raced. Rule number 4. Do not accept payment in anything other than U.S. currency. This was a test. What would happen if I took it? What would happen if I didn't? The little wooden bird seemed to pulse faintly in her hand, the red eyes glinting. It felt hungry. I shook my head, my throat tight. I can't. Only U.S. currency. Her face twisted, not in anger, but in a profound, gut-wrenching despair. No, she pleaded, you don't understand. He won't let me pass. He needs this. Her voice dropped to a barely audible whisper, her eyes darting to the darkness beyond her window. He takes something if you don't pay, something important. A cold dread seeped into my bones. He? Who was he? The thing that had given me the cursed 20? The entity that drove the empty car? My blood ran cold. The price for refusal was not for me, but for her. I was just the conduit. I saw her hand, still trembling, holding out the wooden bird. Her fingers were bony, almost translucent, and just under the skin, faintly visible, were lines. Thin, dark, intricate lines that moved, subtly, like worms under parchment. My gaze flickered to her face, to her neck. The lines were there too, a network of them, like veins, but too dark, too precise, spreading beneath her skin. This wasn't a woman. This was a puppet. And the strings were the lines under her skin. I wouldn't. This was not a transaction I could facilitate. I shook my head again, more firmly this time. I'm sorry. I can't. The despair on her face deepened into something terrible. A silent scream. Her hand, still holding the bird, dropped slowly to her lap. Then, with an unnatural jerk, her head snapped back. A thin, guttural gurgle escaped her lips, and the lines beneath her skin seemed to writhe, to pulse, as if tightening. The red eyes of the little wooden bird suddenly glowed brighter, reflecting the booth's light like tiny, malevolent embers. And the car, without her touching the wheel, without a sound, slowly began to back away. The light from the booth illuminated her face for a final, horrific moment. And I saw it. The lines under her skin weren't just moving, they were draining her. Her face seemed to sink inwards, the flesh hollowing, the eyes becoming even more like dead pools. It was as if something was being pulled from her, leaving only a husk. The car receded into the snow, carrying its emptied passenger, and the glowing red eyes of the wooden bird were the last thing I saw before it vanished completely. I had followed rule number 4, but at what cost? I hadn't taken the payment, but something else had, something out there. The horror was not just what came to the booth, but what the booth demanded from those who couldn't pay, or those who paid with the wrong currency. And I was complicit. My hands, the same hands that had taken that first, cursed 20, were now stained by this new horror. Every night, the weight of what I had done and what I was forced to do pressed down on me, a crushing, suffocating blanket of dread. I'm still here, trapped. The sun hasn't truly risen in days, just a bruised, sickly light that barely scratches at the perpetual twilight. Every shadow feels like a living, breathing thing, closer now, bolder. My fingers ache, my eyes burn, but I keep the light on. Always. I'm broadcasting this, my voice hoarse, because you need to know. Those rules weren't just for this cursed booth. They're about something ancient, something that demands payment, not just in coin, but in fear, insanity. I broke the first rule. I took the money. And now, I'm its prisoner. The long night is coming, the one that never truly ends. I can feel it out there, waiting. If you've ever felt that chill, that whisper of something wrong, something ancient demanding its due, tell me. Share your own stories, your encounters with rules you didn't understand in the comments below. Perhaps by sharing, by speaking into the void, we can keep the light on for each other. Stay safe out there. Don't make my mistake. Don't take the money. Don't break the rules.